The phone rings so rarely that I've forgotten what it sounds like. When that piercing sound suddenly rings in the silence of the house, I flinch, dropping the tweezers I used to carefully peel the fragile pages of an old book. For a second, I stare at the machine as if it were a suddenly revived relic. The fourth ring brings me back to reality. Wilbur Baxter here, I say, trying to keep my voice firm. Dad, it's Pierce. I clutch the receiver tighter. My son calls once every few months, usually when he needs something. The last time was before Christmas, when he wanted to make sure I wasn't coming over for family dinner. Ruby turns 10 next Saturday, he continues without preamble. It's going to be a celebration. Vivian insists I invite you. I know Vivian, my sister-in-law, doesn't have warm feelings for me. Her insistence can only mean one thing: to maintain decorum in front of the other guests. 3 o'clock, Pierce adds, not waiting for my response. Try to look decent. He says the last words with a peculiar intonation, and I involuntarily lower my gaze to my hands, dry with the dark stains of age and the embedded traces of the chemicals I've used to treat my collections. I'll be there, I answer briefly. And Dad, his voice becomes strained. No weird gifts, okay? No more of your exhibits. Ruby's not a little girl anymore. She doesn't need those creepy things. I swallow the bitterness rising to my throat. Sure, Pierce. See you Saturday. He hangs up without saying goodbye. I walk slowly back to the table where the atlas lies open. On the yellowed pages are exquisitely rendered watercolor drawings of the human body. Every muscle, every vein drawn with surprising accuracy and artistic beauty at the same time. I found this book a month ago at the estate sale of Dr. Quinn, who had worked at our hospital before me. Spent almost all of my savings, but I couldn't resist. Every night since then, I've carefully restored it, gluing the pages back together, removing the stains of time. I know Ruby is interested in biology. It's the only thing I know about my granddaughter, who I see once a year if I'm lucky. The last time I noticed her looking with interest at an illustration from a medical reference book that happened to be on view in my house when Pierce stopped by briefly before last Christmas. My house, I look around. Others would probably call it strange or even intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with medical treatises from different eras, display cases of antique surgical instruments I've collected all my life. In the corner of the living room, a glass cabinet with 19th century papier-mâché anatomical models showing human internal organs. On the walls are engravings of famous surgeries and portraits of great surgeons. I know Pierce hates this house. He stopped coming here after Hilda died 5 years ago. Sometimes he'd send Ruby and the nanny, but only if Vivian couldn't come up with an excuse. Hilda, the picture on the mantelpiece is the only non-medicine related picture in my living room. She smiles at me from a faded photo taken on our wedding day, 47 years ago. Blonde hair gathered into an elegant style, clear gray eyes looking with love and a slight sneer. She was never afraid of my profession. She was even interested in it. You talk to the dead to help the living, she said. What could be more noble than that? I carefully turned the page of the atlas. A male figure with naked muscles, every fiber rendered in astonishing detail. Signatures in Latin and calligraphic handwriting, art and science in one binding. Ruby must appreciate such beauty, if Pierce will allow it, of course. I sigh and close the book. I feel the ache in my joints intensify, a sure sign of impending rain. 73 years is taking its toll. My life has always been about death, though few realize the irony. A pathologist is not someone who loves death, rather one who seeks to understand its mechanisms in order to protect the living. I've always considered my profession important, albeit lacking the glamour that surrounds other medical specialties. But Pierce never understood that. I remember when he was a kid, he was teased at school as the son of a cadaver. He'd come home in tears, and I couldn't find words of comfort. Hilda was better at it. She explained to him that children are cruel out of fear and ignorance, that his father was doing an important job. He seemed to understand, but only when she was around. When Pierce turned 15, something happened that finally changed our relationship. The hospital was practicing an open house for the children of employees. Career guidance. Hilda insisted Pierce come to my ward. I showed the youngsters the lab, explained our work. No autopsies, of course, just equipment, instruments. But Pierce, wanting to impress a girl in the group, slipped into a closed part of the ward and happened to see a body on the table. He fainted, then he vomited for a long time. At home, he yelled at me, "How can you do this? Cutting up dead people?" "It's disgusting," I tried to explain. I told him how important my work was, how I was helping to uncover the causes of death, saving other people. But he wouldn't listen. And then he uttered a phrase that has stayed between us forever. "I'll never be like you." And he kept his promise. He went to university to study hotel management, as far away from medicine as possible. Married Vivian, a girl from a family of hereditary lawyers, who looked at me with poorly concealed disgust when we first met. Built a successful restaurant business, created an image of the perfect family. There was no room in his world for a pathologist father. My Hilda died of a stroke 5 years ago. Pierce organized the funeral. Perfect, expensive, with a dozen wreaths and a cremation she would never have chosen for herself. I didn't argue. By then, we were only talking about the weather and politics, and rarely at that. But then Ruby came along. My granddaughter inherited Hilda's inquisitive mind, and it seems my interest in the way the world works. Once, when she was 7, she asked me what the human heart was made of. Not metaphorically, literally, what chambers and valves it had. I showed her an illustration in an old textbook. She stared, mesmerized, asking precise questions. In that moment, I felt a connection that Pierce and I had never had before. Vivian interrupted our conversation and led Ruby away, throwing me an icy stare. Since then, their visits have been even less frequent. And now this invitation, I know it's forced, but the chance to see Ruby, to give her an atlas that might inspire her. I rise from my chair, feeling my knees crunch, and head into the workshop. There, on the work table, are my restoration tools. I have to finish the atlas by Saturday. Every page has to be perfect. The wind tosses raindrops through the windows of my house, but it's warm and dry inside. I turn on my desk lamp, put on my magnifying glasses, and dive into my work. Let the weather rage outside the windows. In my world, there are only these pages I am preparing for my granddaughter. Maybe she is the only one who can understand and appreciate the beauty of the human body hidden under the skin. I work late into the night, carefully cleaning each page from the stains of time, gluing up damaged areas, restoring colors where they have faded. It's painstaking work that requires patience and precision, qualities I've developed over decades in the preceptor's office. As the clock strikes midnight, I finally allow myself to rest. I close the atlas, gently covering it with a soft cloth. A few more evenings of work and it will be ready to be a gift for Ruby. Pierce won't understand. Vivian will be horrified. But maybe in my granddaughter's eyes, I'll see the same spark of understanding I saw in Hilda's years ago. I go up to the bedroom, touching my wife's picture in passing. In the darkness, it looks like she's smiling in approval of my plan. "I hope you're right," I whisper into the void. In the morning, I wake up to the doorbell ringing. It's rare to have guests in my house. Usually it's just the mailman with a pension, or occasionally my neighbor, Mrs. Brooks, who out of the goodness of her heart sometimes brings me a pie or a casserole, worrying that I can't cook. I throw on a robe and go downstairs. On the doorstep is a tall man with a box in his hands. I don't immediately recognize him as Conrad Phelps, my former assistant from the hospital. "Dr. Baxter," he exclaims with a smile, "I was hoping to catch you at home." He looks a little embarrassed, shifting from foot to foot as I invite him inside. Conrad worked with me for the last 5 years before I retired. Young, capable, but nervous. "I apologize for the intrusion," he says as he walks into the living room and looks over my collection with interest. "I found these things while sorting through the old archives at the hospital. Thought you might be interested." He sets the box on the table. I look inside and feel my pulse quicken. There are folders of my records, a few rare medical journals, and, most precious of all, a set of antique scalpels in a leather case. "They were supposed to be disposed of," Conrad explains. "The new management thinks such things only take up space. I knew you were a collector." I carefully pull out the case, open it. 6 bone-handled scalpels, at least 150 years old. A real treasure for a collector like me. "Thank you, Conrad," I say sincerely. "It's a very valuable gift." He smiles, clearly pleased with my reaction. "How is your life in retirement, Dr. Baxter?" "Quiet," I answer. Reading a lot, restoring old books. And how's the hospital? We talk about the changes in the department, about the new equipment, about the young specialists who came after me. I listen with interest and a little nostalgia. 36 years I worked there. Almost my whole life. You know, Conrad says suddenly, going through the magazines in the box. A lot of things have changed at the hospital. The new head doctor thinks the pathologist should be more public. We now give public lectures to medical students. We even give tours. Tours to the morgue? I can't hide my surprise. In an ethical manner, of course, he adds hastily. But yes, we show the equipment, tools, talk about the work. It's part of the new education program. I shake my head. In my day, that was impossible. We worked behind closed doors. Remember that incident with my son? Conrad nods. The story of how Pierce accidentally saw the body and fainted became legendary in the department. How is he, by the way? Conrad asks. I hear he has a chain of restaurants now? Yeah, I can feel my voice getting drier. It's a very successful business. 4 restaurants in Devil's Lake and 2 in neighboring towns. You must be proud of him. I'm not answering. What can I say? That my son is ashamed of me? That he has built his life in contrast to mine? That he makes sure I see my granddaughter as little as possible? He has a daughter, I say instead. Ruby. She's about to turn 10. Really? Conrad smiles. She must be a wonderful girl. Does she look like you? Hilda, I answer. She has the same eyes and curiosity. She's interested in biology. I show Conrad the atlas I'm working on. He flips carefully through the pages, admiring the artist's skill in the precision of the anatomical details. It's amazing, he says. Do you want to give this to your granddaughter? Yes, for her birthday, this Saturday. Conrad frowns. And her parents. Would they approve of such a gift? I sigh. I don't think so, but it's the only thing I have that she might be interested in, which might, I stammer. It might create a bond between us. Conrad nods understandingly. He knows about my complicated relationship with my son. He was there when Hilda died, and he saw how coldly Pierce held on. You know, Dr. Baxter, he says thoughtfully, I think it's a great gift. Ruby will probably appreciate it, and if her parents don't like it, well, they'll have to explain why art and science should be off limits to a child. I'm smiling. Conrad always knows how to lighten the mood. Young, energetic, he reminds me of myself at his age, before the years and loneliness made me who I am now. When Conrad leaves, I take up work on the atlas again. I have a new confidence now. I finish the restoration and give the book to Ruby. Let Pierce and Vivian think whatever they want. Over the next few days, I work on the atlas with the utmost care. Every page is cleaned of stains, every tear neatly taped, every illustration restored where the colors have faded. I use special harmless preservatives to protect the paper from further deterioration. It's painstaking work, but I enjoy it. In the end, patience and attention to detail are the qualities that have made me a good pathologist. When the work is done, I look at the result with pride. The atlas looks almost as good as new, even though it is over 200 years old. I carefully wrap it, first in soft, acid-free paper, then in a layer of protective tissue, and finally in colorful gift wrapping with a butterfly pattern. I attach a card on which I have written in calligraphy, Dear Ruby, discover the mysteries of the world with love, your grandfather. The evening before Ruby's birthday, I can't sleep for a long time. I lie staring at the ceiling and think about how tomorrow will go. I imagine Ruby opening the present, her eyes lighting up with interest as she flips through the pages, asking questions. I imagine Pierce and Vivian watching us with bewilderment, not understanding this bond between grandfather and granddaughter. In my fantasies, everything ends well. Ruby convinces her parents that she needs to see me more often, that she's interested in my collections and stories. But deep down, I know the reality could be very different. Pierce could take the gift away before Ruby even looks at it. Vivian could make a scene, accusing me of traumatizing the baby. They might kick me out of the house, forbid me from seeing my granddaughter. I fall asleep with a heavy heart, but with determination. I have to try. For Ruby, for Hilda, and maybe a little for myself. Atlas lies on the table by the bed, carefully packed, ready for tomorrow. In the darkness, it appears as a glowing object, exuding secret knowledge. I reach out, touch the package. May we succeed, I whisper into the darkness, not knowing whether I'm addressing the Atlas, Hilda, or myself. The morning greets me with a familiar ache in my joints. At 73, every awakening is a reminder of age. I rise slowly out of bed, stretch my stiff fingers, and look out the window. The rain is still pounding on the roof, the gray sky covered in clouds. The weather in Devil's Lake is unpredictable this time of year. Leaning on my cane, I walk down to the kitchen. I turn on the old-fashioned kettle and take out a tin of tea, a habit from Hilda's time. She always said that properly brewed tea was the best way to start the day. While the water boils, I look out the window at my neglected garden. Hilda used to plant roses and lilies there. Now it's overgrown with weeds. I have no energy or desire to garden. The only things I keep in order are my collections and books. Tea warms my hands. I sit in a chair by the fireplace, which I haven't lit in years. On the mantelpiece are photographs. Hilda on our wedding day. Pierce in his senior year of high school with a strained smile. Ruby as a 5-year-old, the only picture I have of my granddaughter. Pierce doesn't send any new ones. My gaze rests on my son's high school picture. I remember that day. He didn't want me to attend the graduation. Said he'd be embarrassed. You know, Dad, how the other kids feel about your work. Hilda insisted I go. Sat in the back row, applauded when Pierce got his diploma. He didn't even look in my direction. It started when he was about 9. Before that, he proudly told the school that his father was a doctor. Kids marveled. Teachers nodded approvingly. But then one of my classmates found out exactly what kind of doctor I am. Your dad cuts up dead people, they yelled at him at recess. He messes around with dead bodies. He smells like formalin and death. Pierce came home in tears. I tried to explain to him the importance of my job. I told him how pathologists help uncover the causes of disease, how autopsies have led to important medical discoveries, how we help the police solve crimes. But it's disgusting, he sobbed. Why can't you just be a regular doctor? Who treats living people? Hilda tried to help. She explained to Pierce that all professions were important, that his father was doing what others couldn't or wouldn't do. It helped for a while, but then it started again. In middle school, the problem worsened. Teenagers could be especially cruel. They'd come up with nicknames. Son of a cadaver, morgue kid. One day a dead rat was planted in his locker with a note, material for your daddy. Pierce became secretive, withdrawn. He no longer brought friends home, and if anyone asked about my profession, he lied that I worked in hospital administration. Dad, please don't come to parent-teacher conferences, he asked. I'll say you're on a business trip. I agreed, even though it broke my heart. Hilda would go in my place, coming back with news of his progress and problems. He's just going through a difficult age, she comforted me. It'll pass. He'll understand. But he didn't. Over the years, the chasm only deepened. The incident at the morgue when 15-year-old Pierce accidentally saw the body was the final straw. He didn't speak to me for a week. Hilda flitted between us, trying to communicate. Give him time, she said. He's just a kid. He doesn't understand. But even as he got older, Pierce didn't change his attitude. He chose a university in another city, came home only for holidays. He was studying hotel management, a field as far removed from medicine as possible. When I tried to ask him about his studies, he answered in one word, without interest. In his 3rd year, he met Vivian. She came to Devil's Lake for summer vacation. She came from a family of hereditary lawyers, rich and respected. Her father was a judge, her mother a law professor. When Pierce brought her in to meet her, I could sense her attitude, a mixture of disgust and condescension. So you're, a pathologist? She asked, barely touching my outstretched hand. How unusual. Hilda did her best to smooth over the awkwardness. Cooked the best dinner, asked Vivian about her plans, praised Pierce, but I could see Vivian squeamishly looking around our house, wrinkling her nose when she noticed the anatomical atlas on the bookshelf. Later, I overheard them talking on the veranda. How can you live in this, museum of horrors, she asked. These books, these instruments. It's not normal. I know, Pierce replied. That's why I don't come home much. Your father, he's weird, Vivian continued. All those years of working with the dead, It must have taken a toll on his psyche. I closed the door quietly, not wanting to hear my son's response. But his silence was more eloquent than any words. A year later, they were married. It was a lavish wedding at a country club with 300 guests, most of whom were friends and colleagues of Vivian's parents. Hilda and I sat in the far corner of the banquet hall, feeling like strangers at our own son's party. "He's happy," Hilda whispered, squeezing my hand. "That's the main thing, isn't it?" I nodded, unable to admit even to myself what I felt. My son wasn't just starting a new life, he was completely renouncing the old one. From me. After the wedding, they moved into a large modern house on a hill overlooking the lake. Pierce opened his first restaurant, an elegant establishment with author's cuisine and wine list, which he compiled personally. Vivian took care of the interior, minimalist, cold, without a single detail that reminds of the past. They invited Hilda and me over every few months for Sunday lunch or a family celebration. Each visit turned into an ordeal. Vivian watched my every word, afraid I would say something inappropriate at the table. Pierce avoided direct conversation, talking about the weather, prices, politics, anything but real life. When Ruby was born, I hoped it would make a difference. Becoming a grandfather seemed like a chance for a new relationship with my family. I bought gifts for my granddaughter, tried to be helpful, but Vivian always found reasons why I shouldn't hold the baby, feed her, be alone with her. "She has a sensitive stomach," she said, taking Ruby from my arms, "and she's afraid of strangers." "I'm not a stranger," I countered. "I'm her grandfather, who she sees once every 6 months," Vivian parried, walking off with the baby into the other room. Pierce never interfered. He built his perfect life with no room for a pathologist father. His restaurants flourished. He appeared in the local papers as a successful entrepreneur, a model family man. In photographs, he was always with Vivian and Ruby, the perfect family with an impeccable reputation. He preferred not to mention my existence. When reporters asked about his family, he spoke of his wife, his daughter, and his mother-in-law and father-in-law, Vivian's parents, who lived in a neighboring state. Not a word about me. Hilda suffered from this more than I did. She tried to mend relations, calling Pierce, inviting them over, offering to help with Ruby, but the result was always the same: polite refusal. "He's ashamed of us," she said painfully. Ashamed of his origins, of his home, of his father. I didn't know how to comfort her. It was the truth. And then she had a stroke. Hilda collapsed in the kitchen while making dinner. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. She died in the hospital without regaining consciousness. Pierce didn't arrive until the next day. He was in shock, but he kept a low profile. He organized everything: the coffin, the ceremony, the cremation. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. At the wake, he introduced me to his business associates as Hilda's father, not his father. I pretended not to notice. What difference does it make now? After Hilda's death, our relationship became even more formal. Christmas cards, occasional phone calls. He almost stopped bringing Ruby back. Sometimes he sent her with Nanny, an older woman who looked at me with ill-concealed curiosity, like a museum piece. But despite all this, a strange bond developed between Ruby and me. She was a curious child, asking lots of questions. When she was 5, she saw a model of a human heart in my office and asked what it was. I explained it to her in simple words. She listened, mesmerized. "Why is it red?" she asked. "Where does the blood pass through? What is a valve?" I answered, showed her illustrations in medical books. She didn't seem afraid, she didn't seem disgusted, only interest. Nanny reported it to Vivian, and the visit stopped for a few months. When Ruby showed up at my house again, the first thing she asked about was my heart. "I was reading a book," she said seriously. "There was a drawing of a heart, but it wasn't like the one on your shelf. It was pink and round, and wrong." "It's a symbolic image," I explained. "In reality, the heart looks very different." "Show me the real one," she demanded. I showed her the anatomical atlases, explained how the heart worked, how the blood flowed. She asked precise questions, memorized terms. At 7 years old, she knew the names of all 4 chambers of the heart, understood how the valves worked. When Vivian found out about these anatomy lessons, she threw a tantrum, screamed that I was spoiling the child, instilling an unhealthy interest in the dead. Pierce backed her up, albeit in a more restrained way. "Daddy, she's 7 years old," he said. "She's supposed to be playing with dolls, not exploring entrails." "She asked," I countered. "She's curious. She's analytical. She's interested because you encourage it," he said. "Normal kids aren't interested in what's under the skin." After that, they stopped bringing Ruby to see me. I only saw my granddaughter on family holidays. Christmas, Thanksgiving. Not always. Often, Pierce and Vivian would go with her to Vivian's parents, leaving me alone. But even in those rare moments when we met, Ruby would find a way to ask me a question or show me that she remembered our conversations. One day, she came up to me at Christmas dinner and said quietly, "Grandpa, I saw a skeleton at school. It was missing one rib. The teacher said it was because God made Eve from Adam's rib. But that's not true, is it? Men and women have the same number of ribs." I smiled and nodded. "That's exactly right, Ruby. Men and women each have 12 pairs of ribs. The story about Adam's rib is a fairy tale." She nodded seriously and ran off before Vivian noticed our conversation. Another time, at Pierce's birthday party, she showed me a cut on my finger. "Look, Grandpa, I was bleeding. It came out, but then it stopped. How does that work?" I explained to her about platelets and blood clotting. She listened, eyes wide open, memorizing every word. These moments were rare but precious. They gave me hope that all was not lost, that there could be a connection between us, despite Pierce and Vivian's resistance. And now I had a chance. Ruby's birthday. A chance to give her something special that would reflect her interest and strengthen our bond. I returned to the table where the anatomical atlas lies. I open it, admiring the illustrations. Each page is a work of art. A male figure with detailed musculature, like an antique statue brought to life on paper. An image of the brain with the finest veins of blood vessels. A heart, open like a flower, showing all its chambers and valves. A hand with exposed nerves like the thin strings of a musical instrument. I imagine Ruby opening this atlas, her eyes lighting up as she flips through the pages, asking questions, memorizing names. In my imagination, she becomes a doctor, maybe even a pathologist, carrying on the family tradition that Pierce so adamantly rejected. But immediately I restrained myself. It's no good putting your unfulfilled hopes on a child. Let Ruby choose her own path. The important thing is that she retains her curiosity, her desire to understand the world around her. I pull out a piece of paper and start making a list of interesting facts about the human body that might interest a 10-year-old girl. Your heart pumps about 5 liters of blood every minute. The length of all the blood vessels in your body, if connected, would be about 100,000 kilometers, enough to circle the Earth twice. Your brain has about 100 billion neurons, about as many as there are stars in our galaxy. I write in small handwriting, trying to fit as many facts as I can onto one sheet of paper. I'll put this list in the atlas, a little bonus for the gift. Maybe Ruby will read it on the sly if her parents forbid her from studying the book. Finishing the list, I check the atlas again. All the pages are in order, the binding restored, the spine reinforced. I carefully wrap the book in acid-free paper to protect it from damage, then in thicker gift wrap with a butterfly pattern. Ruby loves butterflies. I tie a greeting card to the gift. "Dear Ruby, may this atlas reveal to you the beauty of the hidden world. Love, Grandpa. Tomorrow I'm going to Pierce and Vivian's house. I will give this gift to my granddaughter, and so be it." Pierce's house rises on the hill like a modern castle. Glass, concrete, minimalist lines. A cab stops at the gate, and the driver whistles in surprise. "They live here," he says. "It's worth at least $1 million, huh?" I silently pay and get out, clutching the wrapped atlas tighter to my chest. It stopped raining, but the sky is still cloudy. A cool breeze ruffles my sparse gray hair. The guard at the entrance checks the guest list, looks skeptically at my old-fashioned suit, but lets me in. I walk slowly up the natural stone path to the entrance. I hear children's laughter, the sounds of music. The festivities have already begun. The door is opened by a young woman in an attendant's uniform. I introduce myself, and she leads me through the spacious hallway to the garden behind the house. The backyard has been transformed into a children's paradise. Colorful balloons, garlands, tables with treats, even a small stage where a magician is now performing. Dozens of children in smart clothes sit in a semicircle. mesmerized watching the performance. Adults are gathered in groups, talking, laughing, sipping champagne from tall glasses. I feel like I'm at someone else's party. I look around for familiar faces. I spot Pierce, talking to a group of men dressed in suits that cost more than mine. Vivian is standing next to me. Her blonde hair is perfectly styled, and she's wearing an ivory dress that accentuates her tan skin. She looks like a photo model from a glossy magazine. Pierce notices me, and his smile falters for a moment. He apologizes to his companions and heads toward me. "Dad," he says low-key, "glad you could make it." We awkwardly exchange a handshake. No hug, no pat on the shoulder. "Where's Ruby?" I ask. "I want to congratulate her." "She's with her friends." Pierce nods toward the group of girls. Later, when the magician is done, he looks me over from head to toe, and I can see his forehead crinkle at the sight of my old-fashioned costume. "Vivian organized the buffet," he says, "catered by waiters from my restaurant. Everything is top-notch." It sounds like he's making excuses for the lavishness of the feast, or he's warning me not to spoil anything with my presence. "It looks great," I reply. "Naranaham, Ruby must be happy." Pierce nods, but his gaze is already wandering around the garden. He's looking for an excuse to interrupt our conversation. One of the guests waves at him. "Excuse me," says the son. "This is my business partner. Make yourself at home." He leaves, and I am left alone among a crowd of strangers. I walk over to the nearest table of appetizers and grab a glass of non-alcoholic punch. I don't feel like eating or drinking anything, but I need something to keep my hands busy. Vivian notices me and, making an effort, comes over to say hello. Her smile doesn't touch her eyes. "Wilbur," she says, tilting her head slightly. "How did you get here?" "By cab," I answer. "It's a nice holiday. Very big." "Yes, we did our best." Vivian looks around the garden with ill-concealed pride. "Ruby deserves the best." The magician came all the way from Chicago, and the cake was made by the pastry chef from Pierce's restaurant. She talks about the party like it's an important business presentation where every detail must make an impression. I nod and smile, not knowing what else to say. A chasm of incomprehension and silent judgment separates us. "What's this?" Vivian points to the package in my hands. "A gift for Ruby?" "Yes," I answer. "I hope she likes it." "We'll open the presents after the cake," she informs me in a formal tone. "You can put it on the table with the others." She points to a long table littered with brightly wrapped boxes of all sizes. My humble package will look out of place there, but there's no point in arguing. "Sure," I say and head toward the table. Among the dozens of gifts, I find a place for my package. I put the card with Ruby's name on it, written in my calligraphy. Somehow I want her to know it's from me before she opens it. The magician ends his performance to the applause of the children. Ruby sits in the front row. I recognize her by her brown hair gathered into a high ponytail. She's wearing a blue dress with a puffy skirt, clapping her hands and laughing. My heart sinks with tenderness and longing. So rarely do I see my granddaughter happy. She turns and our gazes meet. She looks puzzled for a second, then her face lights up with a smile. Ruby jumps up from her seat and runs across the garden to me. "Grandpa!" she yells, crashing into me with such force that I almost lose my balance. "You came!" I hug her, breathing in the smell of baby shampoo and candy. She's grown since the last time I saw her, and now her top reaches my chest. "Of course you came," I say. "How could I miss my favorite granddaughter's birthday?" Ruby pulls back and looks at me with shining eyes. "I'm 10 years old, can you believe it? Double digits. That's a respectable age," I agree seriously. "Soon you'll be all grown up." She giggles and takes my hand. "Come on, I'll introduce you to my friends." I let her lead me through the garden to a group of girls her age. They look at me with curiosity, and Ruby proudly introduces herself. "This is my grandfather. He was a doctor." "Hello," they say in unison. One of the girls, a redhead with freckles, asks, "What kind of doctor were you?" I open my mouth to answer, but at that moment Vivian walks up to us. Her smile is tight as a string. "Shadow." "Ruby, honey," she says, putting her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's time to cut the cake. Everyone is just waiting for you." She leads Ruby away, not even letting her say goodbye to me. The girls follow, and I'm alone again. I sigh and head to the center of the garden, where a three-tiered cake is set on a high table. decorated with mastic roses and glittering tin candles. Pierce is standing next to the cake, holding a lighter. Vivian leads Ruby over to him, and all the guests gather around. I remain on the periphery, watching my son light the candles as Ruby, surrounded by attention and love, makes a wish and blows them out with one breath. Applause erupts, cameras flash. The cake is cut and distributed to the guests. Ruby gets the first piece, decorated with the largest mastic rose. I refuse the dessert. I don't feel like eating, and the doctor recommended limiting my sugar intake. I just stand on the sidelines watching the festivities, feeling like an outsider. Now the presents, Vivian announces when the cake is done. Ruby, come here, sweetie. Ruby runs over to the table with the presents, and Pierce starts handing her the wrappers one by one. She unwraps them with excited cheers, showing everyone a new doll, an electronic game, an art kit, a fancy purse. The gifts are expensive and numerous. The guests gasp at her joy, take pictures, smile. I wait tensely when it's my turn to receive my gift. Finally, Pierce picks up a modestly wrapped package. This is from your grandfather, he says, giving me a quick glance. Ruby accepts the satin with curiosity, unwrapping the package, carefully removing the protective fabric. When she finally sees the gold-embossed leather binding, her eyes widen in surprise. What is this? She asks, carefully opening the book. It's an 18th century anatomical atlas, I answer, stepping forward. It shows the structure of the human body. Each illustration is hand-drawn in real colors. It's a work of art and science at the same time. Ruby flips through the pages, and her face lights up with understanding and delight. She stops at the picture of the heart, runs her finger along the thin lines of blood vessels. It's amazing, she says quietly. Grandpa, this is the best gift ever. Several of the guests come closer, peering curiously over Ruby's shoulder. I can see the reactions on their faces, from interest to bewilderment and even disgust. What is it? Asked one of the mothers. Are they some kind of anatomical drawings? Vivian, who has been busy talking until now, finally notices what's going on. Her face instantly stiffens. She walks quickly over to her daughter, throwing me an annihilating glare. Ruby, what is it? She asks in a strained voice. What are you looking at? It's a gift from Grandpa, Ruby replies enthusiastically. Look, Mommy, it shows how the heart works, and all the muscles, and the brain. It's a real old book. Vivian turns to Pierce, and I see the alarm pass between them without a word. Pierce immediately walks over to us, his face darkening as he examines the unfolded pages of the atlas. What's this? He asks, and his voice is so quiet that only we can hear it. An anatomical atlas, I answer calmly. It's a rare edition. I had it restored especially for Ruby. You're giving my kid a book with a picture of his insides in it? Pierce raises his voice and several guests turn in our direction. This is a 10-year-old's birthday party, not a lecture on pathology. Shonona Pierce, I say quietly. Ruby is interested in biology. This is a scientific publication, a work of art. I thought she'd be interested. But I'm really interested, Daddy. Ruby intervenes. Grandpa knows I like this sort of thing. We had anatomy in school and I... Shut up! Pierce interrupts her sharply, and Ruby flinches in surprise. Vivian snatches the book from her daughter's hands and flips through the pages. Her face contorts in disgust. Oh my God, she whispers. It's disgusting. It shows all the internal organs, muscles, nerves. This is pornography. It's science, I object. And art. Each illustration is done with incredible skill. Art? Pierce almost screams. You call this art? He snatches the atlas from Vivian's hands and raises it high for all to see. The guests freeze. The conversations subside. Even the children stop playing and look curiously in our direction. Look what my father gave my 10-year-old daughter, says Pierce, addressing the crowd. A book of dismembered bodies. For her birthday. I hear shocked gasps from the guests. Several mothers instinctively cradle their children as if protecting them from an invisible threat. One of the men shakes his head disapprovingly. These are not dismembered bodies, I say, trying to remain calm. They are scientific illustrations by a great anatomist and artist. They show the beauty and complexity of the human body. Beauty? Pierce slams the book shut with such force that it hurts my carefully restored pages. You call that beauty? It's sick garbage. A product of your twisted mind. Pierce, I take a step toward him, trying to speak calmly. Let's not make a scene. Ruby liked the gift, and that's what matters. The main thing? He laughs, but there's no mirth in his laugh, only bitterness and rage. The main thing is that you've never understood what's appropriate and what's not. You've lived your whole life among the dead, and you've lost all sense of normalcy. That's not fair, I say quietly. My profession was important and necessary. I helped people. Helped? Pierce is almost shouting. Who were you helping by cutting up dead bodies? They were already dead, and all you did was cause pain and shame to the living. Me, for instance. Vivian puts a hand on his shoulder, trying to calm him down, but he shakes it off. Do you have any idea what it was like for me at school? He continues, his voice shaking with restrained emotion. Ah, hey, here comes the son of a cadaver. He smells like formalin. Do you know how many times I've come home in tears? And you just told me I should be proud of your work. I didn't know it was so hard for you, I say, feeling the words stick in my throat. Hilda never said, Mom was protecting you, Pierce interrupts. She always protected you. Who protected me? There's dead silence in the garden. All the guests stare at us as if they were watching a dramatic play. Ruby is standing next to her mother, her eyes filled with tears. Pierce, I say, making one last attempt. Let's talk about this later. It's Ruby's birthday. We shouldn't overshadow it. Shouldn't have been overshadowed? He almost laughs. You're the one who ruined it by showing up. With your... this! He shakes the atlas in my face. How can you give my child these disgusting pictures? I remain silent, not knowing what to say. In the back of my mind, I realize he's right. I shouldn't have brought the atlas. Not today, not here, not in front of all these people. I thought Ruby would be interested, I say finally. She loves biology. She's 10 years old, Pierce yells. 10! She's supposed to be playing with dolls, not looking at insides. Sure, but I like the book, Ruby intervenes in a low voice. Daddy, please don't yell at Grandpa. Silence. Pierce turns to his daughter, his face contorted with anger. Go to your friends. This is an adult conversation. Vivian leads the crying Ruby away, whispering something comforting to her. The guests begin to slowly disperse from the garden, pretending to be interested in appetizers or drinks. No one wants to witness a family scandal. Look, son, I say, trying to find a way to make things right. I didn't mean to upset anyone. Don't call me son, Pierce cuts me off. Not here, not in front of my partners and friends. His words hurt worse than a slap. I can feel the blood draining from my face. I understand, I say softly. You're ashamed of me. What should I be proud of? He raises his voice again. That my father spent his whole life digging for dead things? That he can't even act normal at a children's party? I shake my head, unable to find the words to answer. Pierce clutches the satin so tightly that his fingers turn white. Get out, he says finally. Take your book and get out of my house. You're not needed here. Pierce, I make one last attempt. Let's not. Get out, he almost yells, drawing the attention of those guests who haven't gotten far enough away. How can you give my baby this abomination? Get out now. He throws the atlas into my hands with such force that I almost lose my balance. The book falls to the ground, a few pages flying out of the binding. I slowly bend down, picking up the atlas and the pages that have fallen out. My hands are shaking, but I try to keep my dignity. I straighten up, holding the damaged book tightly to my chest. I'm leaving, I say quietly. Give Ruby my apologies and my love. Pierce doesn't answer, only looks at me with contempt. I turn and walk slowly across the garden to the exit. I feel the stares of the guests on me. Curious, judgmental, pitying. I keep my back straight, trying to keep my dignity. At the door of the house, I turn around. I see Ruby breaking away from her mother and running across the garden towards me. Grandfather, she screams. Don't go. I loved your present. I really did. Vivian catches up with her, grabs her arm and says something stern. Ruby cries, trying to get away. I raise my hand in a parting gesture, but I don't stop. There's no point in continuing this scene, making it even more painful for all of us, especially Ruby. As the front door closes behind me, I can still hear her crying. That sound will haunt me for the rest of the day, for the rest of the week, possibly for the rest of my life. Outside, the rain begins to drizzle. I'm standing at the gate, trying to hail a cab through an app on my old phone. My hands are shaking, the buttons seem too small. I finally manage to place the order. The car will be here in 10 minutes. I sit down on a bench by the gate, under a spreading tree that offers a little protection from the rain. I open the atlas, inspecting the damage. A few pages are crumpled, one torn at the spine. Nothing irreparable, but restoration will take time and patience. The rain intensifies, drumming on the leaves above my head. Droplets fall onto the pages of the atlas, and the watercolors begin to spread, creating bizarre patterns. I hastily close the book, clutching it to my chest, trying to protect it from the moisture. The cab arrives earlier than expected. I struggle to get up from the bench, feeling my knees aching. The gray-haired driver looks at me sympathetically. An old man in the rain, with a crumpled book in his hands, banished from his own granddaughter's party. "Bad day?" he asks as I get into the back seat. "Not a good one," I reply, giving him my address. The car starts, and I turn around, looking at Pierce's house fading into the rain. I think I see a small figure in the second-floor window, Ruby watching me. But maybe it's just a play of imagination. The rain intensifies, turning into a torrential downpour. The drops drum on the roof of the cab, creating a monotonous noise that almost drowns out my thoughts. Almost, but not quite. My mind replayed Pierce's words over and over again, his face contorted with anger. Ruby's crying. How did everything go so wrong? How could a simple gift cause such a storm of emotion? But I know the answer. It's not the gift. It's not the atlas. It was the years of misunderstanding, the resentments that had accumulated over decades, Pierce's shame at my profession, my inability to protect him from childhood ridicule. Atlas was just the last straw, the trigger for an explosion that was long overdue. The cab stops in front of my house. I pay, leaving a generous tip. The only way I can express my gratitude that the driver didn't ask questions or comment on my depressed state. The house is dark and quiet. I turn on the light in the hallway, hang up my wet coat, take off my soaked shoes. I walk slowly to the study, carefully carrying the damaged atlas. I put the book on the desk, turn on the desk lamp, put on my magnifying glasses. Carefully, I open the atlas, assessing the damage. The rain did more damage than I thought. Several of the pages are soaked through and the colors have melted away, creating bizarre patterns. The illustrations I had so carefully restored are now blurred, distorted. I feel tears come to my eyes. For the first time in years, I allow myself to cry, not out of self-pity, not out of resentment toward my son, but out of a deep, all-consuming sense of loss. Loss of connection to the only family I have left. The loss of sharing knowledge and beauty with my granddaughter, who is so much like me in her inquisitiveness. The rain continues to pour outside my window, and I sit over the damaged atlas, not knowing if the damage can be repaired. And not just to the book, but to my relationship with my son, with my granddaughter. Is there a way back, or are some bridges burned forever? For 3 days, I didn't leave the house. I sat in a chair by the window, watching the rain, leafing through a damaged atlas. The phone didn't ring. No one knocked on the door. Silence and solitude were my only companions. On the 4th day, the rain stopped. The sun peeked timidly out from behind the clouds, illuminating my neglected garden. The tall grass, the weeds, the wilted rose bushes, all needed attention. Working in the garden has always helped me deal with heavy thoughts. Physical labor distracts the mind, forces it to focus on simple activities. I put on old pants, plaid shirt, rubber boots. I pulled out gardening tools from the shed, many of which hadn't been used in years. Some were rusty, others dull, but most were still usable. He started on the rose bushes, Hilda's favorite flowers. She had planted them along the fence, tending them every morning. After her death, the bushes had slowly gone wild. Now they were a tangled mass of thorny branches with sparse, faded flowers. I carefully trimmed the dry branches, loosened the soil around the roots, and removed weeds. The work was painstaking, requiring attention and patience, qualities I had developed over the years in the prosector's office. Once in a while, I reached out to touch the rose petals, each time surprised by their tenderness. It was strange that hands used to the cold of death could still feel the warmth of life. The sun had risen higher, and it was hot. Sweat dripped down my face, but I kept working. The pain in my back and joints was a reminder of my age, but it was almost pleasant, proof that I could still be useful, if only to my garden. I was so absorbed in my work that I didn't immediately hear a voice calling out to me over the fence. "Dr. Baxter? Wilbur, is that you?" I straightened up, shielded my eyes from the sun with my hand. At the gate stood a middle-aged man with balding hair and thick glasses. His face seemed familiar, but I couldn't remember his name. "It's me, Mortimer Welch," he said, noticing my confusion. "From the sanitation department. We worked together on the food poisoning case in the school cafeteria, remember? About 4 years ago." My memory was quick to conjure up an image: a hospital morgue, the body of a young cook who had died of the same poisoning as the children affected. Mortimer, then a young and nervous inspector, asking questions about possible causes of death. "Of course, Mortimer," I said as I approached the wicket. "I didn't expect to see you here. I was driving by and I recognized your house from the rose bushes," he said, nodding at the flowers I was working on. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing. It's been a while." I invited him into the house. Mortimer stepped awkwardly across the threshold, looking curiously at the collection of medical instruments in the display case. "Impressive," he said, "a real treasure for connoisseurs." I offered him tea and we sat down in the living room. I wasn't used to having guests, so the conversation started awkwardly. We discussed the weather, mutual acquaintances, changes at the hospital. Gradually, the conversation became more casual. "How is your work?" I asked, pouring him some tea. "Still in the sanitary and epidemiologic service?" "Yes, although now we have a hot time," he sighed. "Checking all the restaurants in the city after a series of poisonings." "Poisonings?" I was worried. "Anything serious?" "No one's died yet, if that's what you mean." Mortimer adjusted his glasses. "But the symptoms are unpleasant. Severe vomiting, diarrhea, fever. Several people have developed gastroenteritis, requiring hospitalization." "What restaurant?" I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. Mortimer looked around, as if afraid we'd be overheard. "Actually, more than one. We have 3 confirmed cases, all in different establishments, and they all belong to the same chain." He stopped talking, waiting for my reaction. I knew where he was going with this, but I needed to hear it from him. "What chain?" "Chi?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Ambrosia," Mortimer said, "a chain of fine dining restaurants, owned by Pierce Baxter." "I believe that's my son," I confirmed, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're not very close." Mortimer squirmed uncomfortably in his chair. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I didn't mean to embarrass you." "It's all right," I shook my head. "Tell me more about it. What did you find?" He hesitated. I understood his hesitation. He was going to share official information with the suspect's father, but our long acquaintance and professional solidarity prevailed. "It all started 2 weeks ago," he began. "A family of 4 was hospitalized after a dinner at Ambrosia on Lake Street. At first we thought it was an accident, just food poisoning. But then we got 2 more complaints from other restaurants in the same chain." "So you did an inspection?" I nodded. "What did you find?" "Food storage violations." Mortimer took off his glasses and wiped them with a handkerchief. "Incorrect temperatures in the refrigerators, not observing the shelf life. But most disturbing of all, the source of supply." He put his glasses back on and leaned closer. "The meat they use comes from a farm outside the city. Officially, it passes as organic production, but we have reason to believe that sanitary standards are not being followed there. We've requested an inspection, but the process is dragging on. Someone upstairs is blocking our requests." "Someone powerful?" I asked. "Very," Mortimer nodded. "The owner of the farm is Edward Reed, a city councilman. He and your son, they have a close business relationship." I remembered hearing that name from Pierce. Edward Reed is his golf partner, sponsor of his philanthropic endeavors, a man of impeccable reputation and extensive connections. "Do you think my son knows about the supply problems?" I asked. Mortimer paused, weighing his answer. I find it hard to believe he doesn't know. The difference in price is too obvious. Regular suppliers charge twice as much. And the restaurant business? It's a very competitive environment. A lot of people compromise for profit. We stopped talking. A bird flew past the window, its shadow sliding across the floor. I thought about Mortimer's words, trying to reconcile the image of a son, meticulous, demanding, always looking after his reputation, with a man who deliberately uses substandard products in his restaurants. What do you plan to do next? I finally asked. Keep checking, collecting evidence, Mortimer sighed. But to be honest, I'm not sure we'll be able to follow through. Reed has too many connections. And your son? Well, he's a powerful man, too. He looked at me hopefully, as if expecting me to offer help or advice. But what could I do? Piers hadn't listened to me all his adult life, and after the scandal at Ruby's birthday party, he probably wouldn't want to see me at all. Mortimer finished his tea and rose. I must be off, he said. Thank you for your hospitality, Dr. Baxter. It was nice to see you. Likewise, I walked him to the door. Good luck with the inspections. When he left, I went back to the garden. The sun was already slipping towards sunset, coloring the sky orange and pink. I looked at the rose bushes I'd been working on all day. They looked better, but still needed care. So did the truth about Pierce's restaurants. I couldn't get the conversation with Mortimer out of my head. The thought that my son might be involved in poisoning people seemed unbelievable. Pierce had always been ambitious, but never reckless. He valued his reputation more than anything else. Did his lust for profit cloud his judgment? I decided to see for myself. Maybe Mortimer's wrong. Maybe Pierce doesn't know there's a supply problem. We'd have to get the facts before we could draw conclusions. The next morning, I put on my best suit, combed my hair, and went to Devil's Lake General Hospital. For 36 years, I worked there as a pathologist. Many of the staff still remembered me and treated me with respect. In the emergency room, I met Nancy Parker, a nurse with whom we had worked side by side for many years. She had aged, her hair was completely gray, but her eyes were still as lively and attentive as ever. Dr. Baxter, she exclaimed when she saw me. What a surprise! What brings you here? Hello, Nancy, I smiled. Just thought I'd visit some old friends. How are things at the hospital? We talked about the changes, about the new equipment, about the young doctors who came after me. Gradually, I turned the conversation to the recent cases of food poisoning. Oh, that's terrible, Nancy lowered her voice. We've had several severe cases. One elderly woman almost died of dehydration, and a little girl was barely saved after she developed hemorrhagic gastroenteritis. After visiting what restaurant? I asked as if by the way. Ambrosia on Lake Street, Nancy said. A very expensive place. Can you imagine a family spent almost $400 on dinner and then spent the whole night in the bathroom? They filed a complaint, but I heard the restaurant offered them compensation on the condition of their silence. Compensation? I interjected. Sounds like they're admitting guilt. I don't know, Nancy shrugged. But I heard it wasn't the first time. There was another one a month ago. It was cleared up even quicker then. I thanked Nancy for the information and asked permission to look in the lab. She was a little hesitant. I no longer worked at the hospital, had no official access, but old friendship prevailed. Just for a little while, she said, and don't say I missed you. In the lab, I met Dr. Chang, a young microbiologist. We knew each other. He had consulted with me on several difficult cases before I retired. Dr. Baxter, he shook my hand. What a pleasant surprise. To what do I owe the honor? I explained that I was interested in the recent cases of food poisoning associated with Ambrosia restaurants, without specifying that the owner is my son. It's a curious case, Dr. Cheng nodded. We isolated Salmonella enterica from food samples and biological material from patients. It's an aggressive strain, resistant to some antibiotics. Have you identified the source of infection? I asked. Presumably meat, answered Chung. Beef, to be exact. But the strange thing is that the contamination was found in 3 different restaurants. It points to a common source of supply. Have you passed this information to the Sanitary and Epidemiologic Service? I asked. Of course, Cheng nodded. But the investigation is slow. Too much bureaucracy. Too many interested parties. He looked around, making sure no one was listening, and added quietly, "Rumor has it that the owner of the chain has connections in the city administration, and the meat supplier is also a powerful figure. They are delaying the inspection of the farm where the meat comes from." I thanked Dr. Cheng and asked him to keep me informed if any new information came up. He promised, though probably out of politeness. Walking out of the hospital, I felt strange. On the one hand, I was alarmed by the information about the infection and Pierce's possible involvement. On the other, I felt energized in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. The investigation had awakened in me a professional excitement that I thought had faded since retirement. The next step was to visit a restaurant. I chose Ambrosia on Park Avenue, not the one with the poisoning cases, but run by the same standards. Besides, the likelihood of meeting Pierce there was minimal. He rarely visited the place, preferring the flagship restaurant on Lake Street. The restaurant looked luxurious. Soft lighting, exquisite furniture, live music. The maitre d' escorted me to a table in the corner, away from other diners. The perfect place to observe. I ordered the simplest salad and water. The food didn't interest me, I had come to observe. And soon I noticed the first warning signs. The waiter who brought the bread was unkempt, a stain on his cuff, insufficiently clean fingernails. I saw the bartender, mixing cocktails, touching the ice with his hand several times. A customer at the next table sent the steak back to the kitchen. The meat was undercooked in the center, but the best part started when I asked permission to use the restroom and accidentally turned into the service hallway. A quick glance at the kitchen through the ajar door showed that conditions were far from ideal. The cooks were working hurriedly, some not using gloves when handling raw meat. In the corner, I noticed boxes of food stacked directly on the floor, a gross violation of sanitary standards. I was quickly intercepted by the manager and politely but firmly escorted back to the lounge. I apologized, citing old age and confusing hallways. He accepted the apology but continued to watch me for the rest of the dinner. After paying, I left with the firm conviction that something was wrong with my son's restaurant empire, but more proof was needed. The next day, I called Mortimer and invited him to lunch, not at a restaurant, but at a small cafe on the outskirts of town where we were unlikely to be recognized. "I've been to one of Pierce's restaurants and seen the violations with my own eyes," I said as we settled at a table in the corner. "Ano, but we need more proof than that." Mortimer looked worried. "Dr. Baxter, I appreciate your help, but this is an official investigation, and this is about your son, who may have been involved in poisoning people." I finished the sentence. "If my son is guilty, he must answer for his actions, just like anyone else. We've developed a plan of action. Mortimer would formally request a new inspection of the restaurants, and I would try to learn more about Reed's farm and find former employees willing to tell the truth." Over the next few days, I fully immersed myself in the investigation. I called old co-workers, looked for contacts in the health department, and studied articles about food poisoning in the local press. Gradually, the picture became clearer and more alarming. Through a former colleague, I found Jennifer Mason, a young journalist from the Devil's Lake Chronicle. She agreed to meet me at the same cafe where we had talked to Mortimer. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Baxter," she said when I finished, "especially since it's your son we're talking about. Are you sure you want to continue?" I nodded. "If Pierce is guilty, he has to answer for it. I can't turn a blind eye to people being put in danger." "That's noble," Jennifer smiled, "but you need proof, concrete facts, documents, testimonies. Otherwise, it's just rumors." "I have something." I pulled a folder of collected materials out of my briefcase. The results of laboratory tests on the meat, inspection reports, a list of poisoning victims. All of this is from official sources. "Ah, no. Impressive," she admitted, "but not enough for a major publication. I need something more concrete." The next day I got a call from Mortimer. "We have a problem," he said in a strained voice. "My request for an inspection of Ambrosia restaurants has been rejected. Someone upstairs blocked it." "Who can do that?" I asked. "Only the department head. And from what I hear, he's a frequent guest at your son's restaurants. He gets the best tables, special service." "What do we do?" I asked. "I have a friend at the lab," Mortimer said. "He can do an unofficial analysis if we provide samples. But how can we get them without an official analysis?" In the evening, I visited Ambrosia again, but this time I chose an establishment on Lake Street where cases of poisoning had been reported. In my pocket, I carried a small sterile container provided by Mortimer. Waiting until the waiter turned away, I quickly cut off a small piece of meat and put it in the container, which I immediately stashed in my pocket. 2 days later, the results were ready. Mortimer called me early in the morning, his voice shaking with excitement. "You were right," he said. "Salmonella was found in the meat, the same strain as in the samples from the affected patients. The concentration is quite high." "It's not enough for a court of law," I said. "But for the press, Jennifer Mason would be very interested to hear about it." That same day, good fortune smiled on me. At the supermarket, I happened to run into a young man who had once worked as a cook at Ambrosia. I recognized him from a picture in a newspaper article about Pierce's restaurant. I introduced myself and cautiously struck up a conversation about his former place of employment. He was wary at first, but when I mentioned the poisoning cases and showed him the test results, his face changed. "I knew this would happen," he said, lowering his voice. "I warned the chef that the meat looked suspicious. Sometimes it smelled strange. Sometimes the color was wrong. But he said those were features of organic meat and ordered me to use it. Just cook it at a higher temperature." "Did the chef know about the problems?" I asked. "Of course," the young man nodded. "And so did Mr. Baxter. I once heard them discussing supplies. Mr. Baxter was saying that switching to cheaper meat would save thousands of dollars a month. The chef warned of the risks, but Mr. Baxter insisted. "Would you be willing to tell a journalist about this?" I asked. He hesitated, but after a long pause, he nodded. "Yes, I left Ambrosia because of that. I didn't want to be an accessory." I immediately contacted Jennifer and told her about the conversation with the former chef. She was thrilled. "This is exactly what we need," she exclaimed. "An insider willing to confirm that management was aware of the problems. With that and the results of the tests, we could publish the article." I spent 2 days in tense anticipation. I reread the materials I'd gathered, talked to Mortimer about next steps, tried to anticipate Pierce's reaction to the publication. Part of me still hoped that my son was innocent, that this was all a terrible mistake, but the evidence said otherwise. Finally, on Thursday morning, the new issue of the Devil's Lake Chronicle came out with a blistering front-page headline, "Poisoned Business. High-end restaurants serve dangerous meat." Jennifer's article took up almost the entire page, with a spread following. The reaction was immediate. By noon, all the local TV and radio stations were already talking about the scandal. Social media overflowed with discussions and calls to boycott Ambrosia. By evening, the city authorities announced an urgent unscheduled inspection of all restaurants in the chain. I followed the developments on TV and through calls to Mortimer and Jennifer. The sanitation department, having gotten publicity for the case, acted decisively. All 6 Ambrosia restaurants were temporarily closed until the inspection was completed. Reed's Farm was also inspected. Journalists who arrived there after the inspectors found workers hurriedly cleaning up, and the owner declined to comment. Pierce issued a statement in which he categorically denied the allegations. He called the article a slanderous attack by competitors and promised to sue the newspaper. He stated that Ambrosia restaurants have always maintained the highest quality standards and that poisoning incidents, if any, were isolated. But his words sounded unconvincing in the face of mounting evidence. After the article was published, several more former Ambrosia employees decided to come forward. In the evening, Jennifer called me to give me the latest news. "This is just the beginning," she said. "The editor has given me the green light to continue the investigation. Tomorrow we publish new material, including interviews with 3 former Ambrosia chefs." "How is the public reacting?" I asked. "Customers are canceling reservations en masse. 2 major investors have already announced they're going out of business." "There's something else," Jennifer continued after a pause. "A source close to your son told me that Pierce suspects you of being involved in the scandal." "Me?" I feigned surprise. "Why?" "He knows you've been in contact with people from the sanitation department. Someone saw you with Mortimer Welch. Plus the timing of the publication, right after the scandal at his daughter's birthday party. He thinks it's your revenge." I thanked her for the warning and ended the conversation. Of course, Pierce will guess that I had something to do with the scandal. He's not stupid. The question is what he'll do when he's finally convinced. The next day, things only got worse for Pierce. Jennifer's new article was even more revealing. The prosecutor's office launched an investigation into possible fraud and health code violations. Edward Reed, owner of the supply farm, was called in for questioning. Vivian, Pierce's wife, canceled all public appearances and is rumored to have gone with Ruby to her parents in a neighboring state. Pierce himself barricaded himself in his office, refusing to comment and speaking to the press only through his lawyers. I watched the developments with growing concern. I didn't feel sorry for Pierce. He deserved the consequences of his actions. But I was worried about Ruby. How is she taking this whole scandal? What is she being told about what's going on? Does she realize that her grandfather was involved in her father's downfall? On the third day after the first article was published, I received an unexpected letter, an envelope with no return address, delivered by regular mail. Inside was a piece of paper written in a child's handwriting. "Dear Grandpa," Ruby wrote, "I miss you. Mommy took me away to my grandparents' house, but it's boring there. They keep talking about Daddy and some problem. Dad said you did something bad, but I don't believe it. You can't do bad things. I want to see you. Can you pick me up from school on Friday? We only have 3 classes. Then we could go to a museum or just walk around. No one will know. I'll be waiting for you at the main entrance at 12 o'clock. Please come along. You're Ruby." I reread the letter several times, feeling my heart clench with tenderness and anxiety. Ruby misses me, wants to see me, despite everything that's going on, but a secret meeting without my parents knowing, it was risky, could lead to more problems. On the other hand, the opportunity to spend time with my granddaughter, to explain my side of the story to her, to show her that I still love her despite the conflict with her father. It was too tempting to pass up. I folded the letter and tucked it into my pocket. Friday was the day after tomorrow. I had time to decide what to do. Friday morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Outside the window, a fine rain was drizzling, the gray sky merging with the horizon. The weather matched my mood, uncertain, anxious. I shaved thoroughly, put on a fresh shirt and my best suit, not for Pierce, for Ruby. I wanted to look nice when I picked her up from school. I prepared a folder of atlas illustrations, photos from the family album, a small gift, a book about the human body, adapted for children, which I'd bought yesterday at the bookstore. I ate breakfast without appetite, just out of habit. I looked through the morning paper where the Ambrosia scandal was still occupying the front pages. New details, expert commentary, stories of affected customers. Pierce's name was now associated not with success and luxury, but with deceit and irresponsibility. I put the paper down without finishing it. I didn't enjoy seeing my son's reputation ruined, even if he deserved it. He is my flesh and blood after all, and Ruby's father. My thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. It was sharp, insistent, almost aggressive. It was about 9 in the morning, too early for regular visitors. I tensed, sensing trouble. When I opened the door, I saw Pierce. He looked awful. Wrinkled suit, unshaven face, red eyes. He smelled of alcohol and stale clothes. In his hand was a crumpled newspaper with a headline about his restaurant's closing. "You!" he hissed and stepping forward. "You're the one who set this whole thing up." I stepped back silently, letting him into the house. He strode into the living room, looking around as if he were in a foreign place, though it had once been his home too. "Tea?" I asked calmly. "Tea?" Pierce laughed, but there was no mirth in his laugh, only bitterness. "My business is ruined. My reputation is ruined. My wife has taken my daughter and gone to her parents, and you're offering tea?" "I'm just being polite," I replied, sitting down in my chair. "What do you want, Pierce?" He remained standing, pacing the room nervously. "I want to know why," he said at last. "Nassom, why did you do it? Because of Ruby's birthday? Because I kicked you out? Is this your revenge?" I looked at him calmly. The son I once carried in my arms. The boy I read books to before bed. A teenager ashamed of my profession. A man who rejected me. Now a broken man looking for someone to blame for my downfall. "I did what I had to do," I replied. "Your restaurant served contaminated meat. People got sick. Some ended up in the hospital. You knew about it and did nothing about it." "That's not true," Pierce exclaimed. "I didn't know there was a problem with the meat. It was all Reed. He tricked me." "Don't lie to me," I shook my head. "I have testimony from your former employees. You discussed supply savings with the chef. You deliberately turned a blind eye to irregularities because they were profitable. Pierce stopped. His shoulders slumped. He looked suddenly aged, haggard. All right, he said quietly. I knew the meat wasn't the best quality, but I didn't think it was dangerous. It's just a little below standard. And yes, I was saving money. Do you know how expensive it is to run a restaurant like this? Rent, staff, taxes. There's a lot of competition. One mistake, and you're out of business. So you decided to risk the health of your customers, I finished for him, to maintain your profit margin. I miscalculated, Pierce admitted, sinking back into the couch. I thought it would go away, that no one would notice the difference, that people pay for atmosphere, service, prestige, not just food. He rubbed his face with his hands as if trying to wipe away the fatigue. But you noticed, he continued bitterly, and you decided to destroy me, my own son. I decided to stop the dangerous practice, I corrected him. That it ruined your business is a consequence of your own actions, not mine. Pierce looked up at me with inflamed eyes. Why didn't you come to me? Didn't warn me? Didn't give me a chance to fix this quietly, scandal-free? Would you have listened to me? I asked. After kicking me out of Ruby's birthday party? After all the years of neglect? He was silent, and in that silence was the answer. Of course he wouldn't listen. He'd always considered me an outsider in his flawless world, a nuisance, an inconvenient reminder of roots he'd tried to forget. What now? He asked at last. Are you satisfied? You've destroyed me. What's next? That's up to you, I answered. You can start over. Admit mistakes, compensate the victims, rebuild the remaining restaurants on honest principles. Or you can keep looking for fault and feeling sorry for yourself. Pierce jumped up, his face contorted with anger. You're even lecturing me now, he exclaimed. When I've lost everything, when I came to you for help. Help? I raised an eyebrow. I thought you'd come to blame me. He stopped talking, lowered his head. Okay, he said more quietly. I came for help. Are you satisfied? Your proud son humiliating himself in front of you, asking for help. Enjoy the moment. What kind of help do you want, Pierce? I asked tiredly. Withdraw your accusations, he said. Tell the press it was a misunderstanding. That you didn't mean that I knew there was a problem with the meat, that it was all a mistake. I looked at him in disbelief. After everything that's happened, he's asking me to lie, to cover up his criminal negligence, to frame his reputation. I can't do that, I said firmly, and I won't. Why not? Pierce was almost shouting. You're my father. You have to protect me. I have to do the right thing, I replied. Like I taught you, like I tried to teach you. But I'm broke, he exclaimed. I have nothing left. You have a family left, I countered. Tor, Vivian, Ruby, and you yourself are still young, still smart, still educated. You can start over if you admit your mistakes and learn the lessons. Pierce knelt in front of my chair. The gesture seemed theatrical, insincere, but I could see the real desperation in his eyes. Dad, please, he said quietly. Help me. Yeah, I've been wrong. All these years. I was ashamed of you, of your work, afraid people would laugh at me if they knew my dad was a pathologist. Wanted to be someone else, someone pure. He grinned bitterly, and I ended up being worse than you ever were. You spent your whole life helping people, even if they were dead. And I risked the health of the living for profit. His candor moved me, but I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. There was too much at stake: people's health, justice, the principles I'd spent my life following. I'm sorry, Pierce, I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. But I can't lie for you. I can't deny the truth I helped uncover. It wouldn't be right. He stared at me as if he couldn't believe his ears. You're choosing principles over your own son? I choose the truth, I answered, and responsibility, like I've always done, like every man should. Pierce rose slowly from his knees, his face a mask of cold contempt. You know what always scared me about you? He said quietly. Not your profession. It's your coldness. You look at people the way you look at bodies in the morgue, with detached interest. Even now, when I'm on my knees in front of you, you're analyzing, not feeling. You're probably right, I said. Years of work have taught me to control my emotions. But that doesn't mean I don't feel. It's just that some things are more important than personal feelings. This is it. Pierce pointed his finger at me. That's exactly what I meant. You're like a dissected body. Everything on the surface, nothing hidden, but there's nothing left alive. His words hurt, but I didn't show it. He was right. I had indeed learned to hide my feelings behind a mask of professional equanimity. It was a defense developed from years of dealing with grief, pain, and death. You only see what you want to see, Pierce, I said quietly. I always do. He headed for the door but stopped on the threshold. You know what's funny? He said without turning around. You dissected me as thoroughly as you dissected your dead. Opened up my business, exposed all the hidden problems, exposed my mistakes. And now my whole life lies cut open on your desk. Happy, doctor? With those words, he walked out, slamming the door so hard that the glass in the cabinets rattled. I remained seated in the chair, feeling strangely empty. Talking to Pierce had brought neither relief nor satisfaction. It only confirmed what I already knew. There was a chasm between us that might never be bridged, but at least we were finally being honest with each other. Maybe it was the first step towards something new, or maybe it was a final goodbye. The clock read 10:30. I had an hour and a half before I had to meet Ruby at the school. I decided to get some rest, to collect my thoughts. Pierce's visit had knocked me out of sorts, but I couldn't let it ruin seeing my granddaughter. At 11:30, I hailed a cab and headed for Ruby's school. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast. I was clutching a folder of illustrations and a book, a gift for Ruby. I was as nervous as a teenager on a first date. The cab stopped a block away from the school. I decided to be cautious, didn't want to attract attention. I walked the last part of the way, trying to look like a normal elderly gentleman taking a walk. Ruby's school was a modern glass and concrete building surrounded by a manicured courtyard. I stopped on the opposite side of the street, watching the main entrance. The bell rang at 12 sharp, and the kids started coming out in groups, talking loudly and laughing. Some were greeted by their parents, others walked on their own to the buses or walked home. Ruby was one of the last to arrive. She walked slowly, looking around. She was wearing a blue coat and a red cap, her hair braided into two pigtails. When she saw me, she brightened up and ran across the street, ignoring the safety rules. "Sahana, Grandpa," she exclaimed, hugging me around the waist. "You came. I was afraid you didn't get my letter." I hugged her back, feeling a warmth in my soul. In that moment, all the problems, all the conflicts receded into the background. There was only Ruby, small, warm, alive. "Of course I came," I said. "I've missed you so much." She pulled away and looked at me seriously. "Daddy said you did something bad," she said, "that you got his restaurants closed. Is that true?" I hadn't expected such a direct question. For a moment I was confused, not knowing how to explain a difficult and unpleasant situation to a 10-year-old girl. But then I decided that she deserved an honest answer, even if adapted for her age. "Your dad made a mistake," I said softly. "His restaurants used foods that could make people sick. I found out about it and informed the people who are supposed to keep an eye on such things." "And that's why the restaurants were shut down?" Ruby asked. "Yes, until it's fixed," I nodded. "It's like if someone brought a virus into your classroom. They could quarantine the school so everyone wouldn't get sick." She thought about it, wrinkling her forehead. "But Daddy was very upset. He yelled at Mom, said you ruined everything." "Your dad's upset, and that's understandable." I took her hand. "Nobody likes to have their mistakes pointed out to them, especially when those mistakes lead to unpleasant consequences. But that doesn't mean it's wrong to point them out." Ruby looked at me, and I saw her eyes struggling with conflicting emotions: love for her father, trust in me, trying to understand a difficult adult situation. "Are you mad at Daddy?" she finally asked. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm disappointed by his actions, but I'm not angry with him. He's still my son, and you're still my granddaughter, and I love you both very much." She smiled, apparently satisfied with the answer. "Where are we going?" she asked, changing the subject. "You promised a medical tour." "I was thinking of the Natural History Museum," I said. "Sanam, there's a whole room dedicated to the human body, with model organs, interactive exhibits. You'd love it." "Sounds great," Ruby jumped with excitement. Can we go to the cafeteria afterwards? Mom never lets me eat ice cream in cold weather. Sure, I smiled. Today is a special day.